say it as eloquently as possible, Bandai Namco's Tales series is a really big thing. The series itself has had enough mainline entries since its inception in 1995 to compare it to the mainline Final Fantasy series. Many of its entries have been re-released via ports or remasters, and there exist a number of spin-offs as well. Tales is a staple in Japan, constantly selling hundreds of thousands of copies. Despite this, the franchise's name holds weight largely in niche circles westward, and has only recently grabbed a notable market share of its genre, the JRPG, in international markets. This was a development that led to the accelerated localization plans for the latest entry in the series, Tales of Zestiria. Today, we look at Tales of Graces F, an entry that saw a Western release back in 2012. Originally released for the Wii in 2009 as Tales of Graces before the F variant was created as an enhanced port for the PlayStation 3 in 2010, the ported version was the only one that found itself localized in the West. The port gave enhancements to graphics, gameplay refinements, and a lengthy epilogue that introduced a new story arc, new gameplay mechanics, and a plethora of new content to explore. Graces F is often considered one of the more divisive games in the series, with most opinions voiced offering a take on the game that paints it as either one of the worst or one of the best in the series. Proper etiquette dictates I note my previous experiences in the series. The games I have played through before Graces F are Symphonia, Hearts R, and Xillia 2. And hey, if you're interested in seeing my opinions on Graces F in more detail, feel free to check out the Let's Play of the game I've recently finished. Assuming I get this video up relatively soon, which I probably won't. Tales games are action JRPGs, or action Japanese role-playing games. It's a fun little label to essentially say the game works like most JRPGs, but the battles are real-time and skill-dependent. The player walks around the overworld and encounters wandering monsters. After contact is instigated, a new closed area is created to play out the battle between party and enemy. The player controls one character at a time, while the AI, using your set strategy, controls the other party members. They can attack, guard, dodge, switch characters, and more. The real time can be paused for various initiatives like using items, evaluating the enemy, or just adjusting strategy. Initially, the Tales series started with a battle system more closely compared to a side-scroller, beat-em-up, or fighting game. A 2D plane was traversed in real time as the player could combat the enemy. As the series made its transition into the third dimension, the 3D take on the system is still reminiscent of 2D fighters. In practice, a character is only ever in a 2D plane when engaging the enemy. A lane of primary movement is established by the 2 points created by the player and the targeted enemy. Actively altering this 2D plane is the main use of the 3D space. Between sidesteps for dodging, changing targets, and AoE attacks, the 3D plane offers a wide variety of tactical possibilities to the base system concept. Ultimately, this approach to combat can be considered quite unique to the Tales series and one of its greatest strengths. While most Tales games are cut from very similar cloth gameplays-wise, Tales of Graces F gives itself a unique identity in the series by giving a greater emphasis to well-timed attacks, fluid momentum, and intelligent use of that momentum driving special ability, like Aleph Burst and Excel Mode. Each Tales game has their own take on how to best control the flow of battle. Most often, this can come in the form of establishing combos to trap the enemy in stuns and pile on damage. Grace follows suit, but by rewarding the player with greater opportunities for combos from the skillful use of the field. The game offers a renewable stat called CC. Essentially, it is the limit of the character's combo chain. Intelligent use of attacks and dodges can earn the player more CC mid-combo, and party members using unison can keep the enemy stunned even longer to further combo chains. While Grace's systems don't typically offer the type of flashiness that other entries in the series give, it does offer a sense of fluidity to the movement and attacks that I had not experienced in the previous games I played in the series. It does ultimately feel a lot more satisfying than alternative takes on the system. Beyond the main battle mechanics, there are a plethora of gameplay initiatives that the game sets out before the player. Many of these act as methods of customizing your party for the main gameplay aspect. One of these includes strategies. Strategies are essentially orders given to AI party members to follow when you are not controlling the character. Such a mechanic isn't so uncommon in party-based RPGs. The ultimate question is how useful are the orders given to the party members? In Graces F, the strategies available feel underdeveloped. While you can give general directives to each member and vary their tendencies in certain aspects of battle, the options on display do not provide the flexibility to employ detailed plans of attack. Instead, each party member is relatively independent with vague approaches you can set. You can't really keep someone focused on something as specific as healing. You can't offer preferential skills to use. The options in place are, well, manageable, but there's a little else you can do with them besides that. Manage. Other contributing mechanics include an alchemy system, equipment allocation, and collectibles just in general. By alchemy, I refer to dualizing and the Eleth Mixer. Dualizing allows the creation of new items from components, and the Eleth Mixer is a device that creates set items or effects for use in and out of battles. The Eleth Mixer in general adds an extra dimension to battle that is very welcomed. Dualizing is an extra method for really acquiring additional supplies, making junk items more valuable, and the primary method for upgrading equipment. It is more a result of another mechanics prevalent through the game: collectibles. The number of items in the game can seem nonsensically large at some points. On its own, this number used to expand the dualizing mechanics does not seem as severe as it could be. Many side quests are dependent on these items though. Bar the occasional side story quests, side quests ask you to track down a variety of arbitrarily dropped items or discover unintuitive recipes to create arbitrary items. While these actions are never required for the main quest and rarely required for significant side quests, completionists may find themselves a little dependent on external resources like the internet to complete such tasks in a reasonable time. These are not to say the mechanics are bad. The base system is very enjoyable and satisfying to participate in, but the extended complementary mechanics don't often find themselves striking a good balance between underdeveloped and overdeveloped, while also contributing an effective depth to the systems. Essentially, these systems are effective but could use better tinkering. A last side note on the system is the ability for the same to be played as a co-op game. Multiple players can take up multiple party members in battle. I didn't try this myself, but it would be shame not to make people aware of it. Now, the Tales games are not really known for their stories. Typically, there are relatively basic stories with an interesting cast of characters going on adventure to save the world, in some way or form. Often filled with cliches and tropes, the series uses the story as a mechanism to engage the player with the gameplay mechanics and the characters over offering something extremely exceptional in its own right. Graces doesn't deviate much from this in this aspect. To note, this doesn't really make it bad. It just makes it so it doesn't really seem like it's making much of an effort to be more than what it needs to be. In Tales of Graces F, we start off with the lives of the young lord's children of the town called Lant. Aspel and Hubert, while exploring on a nearby cliffside, they stumble upon a mysterious amnesiac girl who is soon to be named by the kids as Sophie. They return to their home and meet up with Cheria, a friend and daughter to the family butler, and make friends with the visiting Prince Richard. In pursuit of helping the girl, Aspel continues to make bad decision after bad decision until tragedy strikes. All head their separate ways as new clarity of what they want out of life is made clear. After 7 years apart, trouble in the homestead brings Aspel away from his studies at the National Knight Academy. As war seems imminent and other foreign nations seem intent on disrupting the delicate situation, Aspel must find a way to truly live for the values he has strived for and lead his land to safety. Meanwhile, a deeper darkness has festered in resentment that may threaten life as it is known. With this looming storm, Aspel must gather comrades, track down the source of disruptions, and unearth the secrets behind the history of his world, also known as Affinia. Graces F's story will not typically be one that takes the player by surprise. Plot twists can often be fleeting, and the most interesting aspects have to do with the lore that sets the events in motion as is. Structurally, it falls into layers, as the plot often revolves around stumbling upon the next important key piece of unraveling the before-mentioned lore. the use of large revelations can sort of hurt the plot, as the pacing suffers from it. Simply put, the game is very long, and the plot doesn't have enough depth to create a good pace for the reveals in the story structure. What Graces F does do well is its characters and their interactions. Every character is given a commendable performance with quite a lot of memorable moments for banter and development that can overcome some of the more cliché aspects to their personality. It is often a trend of Tales games to drag the player in by the likability of their cast. Graces F is no different. The main cast are all people you'd want to root for despite their flaws and missteps. Like said before, what a Tales story really needs to do is have a cast of characters you want to go on an adventure with and provide them with a reason to really save the world. Despite the issues that plague the game from a pure plot and pacing aspect, the story still manages to be enjoyable without ever really being the main draw for players. Originally for the Wii, the game has enhanced graphics to still end up looking like updated graphics from the previous generation before the PlayStation 3. As per the usual case with JRPGs on the PS3 and 360 generation, the graphics make very little attempt to push the capabilities of the system. Instead, Graces F has an art style that manages to age relatively well. Unfortunately, much of the charm of the art style ends up being like a coat of paint applied from a single view angle. Some of the story animations can be rigid and puts the graphics in positions that leave the flaws quite vulnerable. The new Future arc created for the PS3 port typically fared considerably better, even having moments where the animations could be called impressive. That's not to say that that makes the dozens of hours before that better in terms of animation. In contrast, the animations for the battle system is some of the better animations I've seen from the series. They offer a sense of fluidity that I can't recall ever really having or getting much of an impression of when playing the other Tales games that I've played, which includes, as I've said before, Symphonia, Hearts R, and Xillia 2. The 2D art also holds up pretty well, being in the spotlight largely in skits or side conversations used to assist character development throughout the story. Unlike many games in the series, Graces F uses full-body portraits for the skits and has unique sprites for a large variety of reactions. That, along with the moving mouths to fully voice dialogues for every single skit in the game, leads to one of the hallmarks of the series being treated very well this time around. On the topic of voices, the voice acting is actually very well done. While I can't say there are any really standout performances that grab spotlights, the quality of the dub is certainly one of the highest quality you can see out of dubbing efforts for video games or, comparatively, anime. All around, good job. No reason to be disappointed. Musically, I don't really have much to say. The soundtrack was quite good, but really, very few had a strong enough melody to make them particularly memorable. The boss battle themes were likely the best of the bunch, with most of them giving a great feel of dread, tension, exhilaration, and many other feelings that go great with those moments. It made those moments memorable, but not necessarily the music, outside of a few exceptions, like, say, Mad Dance, which I would not suggest looking up because that might provide a spoiler. The music included in this review is actually some of my favorites, so you may just get a better impression by listening to those over me trying to explain my opinion. In general though, I like the music. I don't think it's amazing. It doesn't do what some series do and just grabs you and makes you want to listen to the music over and over again just to reminisce about those moments in the game or just listen to the music themselves. The music's good for its purpose, but beyond that, it really doesn't grab you in another way. Why does a person play a game like this? For me, the Tales series has become a constant source of a fun adventure to go on with a great cast and exhilarating gameplay. Much of my opinion on the enjoyment of the game harkens back largely to the comments I already made. Essentially, the gameplay quirks manage to give it a sense of satisfaction. The visuals are underwhelming for the story elements, yet hold up well for the non-essential graphical aspects. Lastly, the story, despite flaws, can still string along the player on an adventure for a long journey. And when I say long, I mean long. The main story took me north of 65 hours to complete when I played on one of the higher difficulties, and I partook in quite a few of the side quests with significant story content and did the epilogue to get a playtime of around 80 hours or so. Ultimately, the game's content is quite expansive, especially the worthwhile stuff. Where the flaws do lie, they can either be avoided in the actual worthwhile content or easily ignored when approached with proper expectations. Most importantly is to note that the issues with the game are often not ones that actively impede the enjoyment of the game. Rather, they are issues that will contradict expectations and damage the experience. The game, with proper expectations for aspects like visuals and plot, will be fun and entertaining for its entire span, as I can attest to. I will make particular note of the game's difficulty, specifically the difficulty spikes that happen at various bosses throughout the game. These can be a considerable burden that ask a lot of the player in comparison to what challenges that have already been faced to that point. Arguably, some of the spikes would be more akin to optional bosses instead of story bosses. Whether this prospect excites you or puts some dismay in your heart, it is most important to be aware that those are to be expected before you actually take on the game. They're not necessarily downsides as much as they appeal to a different sort of person. In general, Tales of Grace's F has deep flaws that only come to run deeper because of the length of the game. A proper evaluation of the game is out of place without proper acknowledgement of these concerns. The game still has much to offer, with those flaws varying widely in their severity based on the motivations for playing the game in the first place. For those who play for gameplay, the difficulty and depth is there to master over hours and hours. For those who play for the grab of interactive storytelling, like myself, Tales of Grace's F is more like a fun romp than a shining star in the night. It can slog and not offer much unique in some instances, so expectations must be kept in check for the plot. Completionists who dislike vague directions for completion can possibly be the most hit, as the game has side content of this style in excess. It is noted that there is still plenty of content to do, and completionists who don't mind this will have just an exorbitant amount of stuff to do, as the game is really long. But it also depends on what type of content annoys you and what doesn't. In the end, I do tend to focus on the potential areas of improvement when analyzing anything, so it may sound like I'm being harsher than I intend to. Grace's F is undoubtedly a worthwhile experience for those who pick it up. As for a rating, I'm sort of split. From a gameplay-focused perspective, I would certainly offer it a top-of-the-genre rating. But from my personal interactive storytelling perspective, which I prefer, I'd say it goes more in the recommended category. As this is me reviewing it, I'm going to have to give it that recommended rating. However, it is important to note that this is one of those games that if it seems like you'd enjoy it, there's a good chance you will. Just from my experience in the Tales franchise, I'd have to say one of the big upsides of the series is the fact that they almost always seem to offer a situation where they will be what you expect and what you want out of the game, so long as you know what you're looking for when you come into the series. They're consistently good, they're consistently recommended, or better, on my experience. As for games recommended outside of this, first of all, I'm gonna have to say, go try other games in the Tales series. Like I said, typically this is a series that actually comes together and is relatively consistent ever since Symphonia. All the games have been relatively similar. They've had some different takes on the gameplay, on the stories, different cast of characters, different worlds, but generally every game I've played I've liked in the same fashion, and they all deliver on what I expect out of the series. So if you like Grace's F, there's a very good chance you'll like the others in the series. As for another recommendation, I'm gonna have to go with Kingdom Hearts. If you've ever heard of it, it is a mashup. It's a JRPG, action RPG also, mashup game between Final Fantasy and Disney, which sounds weird if you've not experienced the series before. If you have, you know what I'm talking about. But it surprisingly works well, and it's another example of a game with a somewhat cheesy story that you can enjoy consistently and very satisfying combat. Particularly Kingdom Hearts 2, I think the combat gets much better. Some people will disagree with me, some people the first one's better. That doesn't matter. But the series is good. I would suggest checking it out if you like the Tales series, as I think there's some similar aspects that you can get the enjoyment out of. Well, that's everything I have to say on the subject. Thanks for sticking around for this inevitably too long review. I appreciate if you stuck around, and hey, if you want to see me play games in the future, review certain games, feel free to give certain suggestions, and I will listen and look at all the comments in that regard. I've played a few in the past, I've seen some in the past, but I want to look at some stuff and get an idea of what people out there are interested that I don't know of yet. So, thank you for your time, and drive safely. Bye!